Your visit to Riga is related to participation in the Baltic International Bank conference. And what has attracted you to this event?
Well, you know what was interesting about the event is really the topic for me. I've spoken all over the world, many different countries, many different major events, usually about real estate and about business and entrepreneurship. Thank you very much. But this was a little bit unique because they wanted to talk about generational wealth, family businesses, and I think it's something that I can actually talk very intelligibly about, something that is obviously very important to myself and my family, but not really a topic that's often spoken about. So when it was presented to me, I was very fascinated by it because I thought it was very kind of progressive thinking. It wasn't just reactionary to the times, like now my kid's 35 years old, what do I do with them? So it was just an interesting topic, and again, probably the thing I can talk most about, but something that I've never had the opportunity to speak about. So it was really fascinating to me, and look forward to hopefully being able to impart some knowledge in an area where clearly there's a lot of wealth being generated. There's a lot of people now having children that are going to be taking over these companies and working in there, and I think it'd be an interesting thing to be able to impart some knowledge back.
Well, but last summer, Latvian press reported that Mr. Krūtoja and Mr. Kozils had visited your office in New York, and that your company has interest in construction concert hall in Riga. Is it true?
We were talking. Conversations. We went back and forth for a little while. Nothing went forward, but it's an area that we are interested in. I mean, we're doing a project right now in Georgia. My father was just over there. We're looking at another project in Baku. Not that it's the same area, but it's sort of similar in terms of the former relationships and the proximity to the Soviet Union and these sort of things. So, I think it's a part of the world that now you're starting to see some amazing architecture, some incredible real estate. You're seeing a real big boom in wealth. Obviously, in some of these more emerging markets, there's a great appreciation for brand and brand names, and I think for real estate and high-end luxury living as well as hotels. Obviously, we have something that's very relevant in that sector, and so it's definitely something that we'd be interested in looking at further.
You just told about your new project in Georgia, but we have never heard about any projects in Russia, but it's a big market. Maybe it should be interesting for such a businessman.
It is. I've been there many times, and I've spent quite a bit of time in Moscow looking at deals. A lot of that was before sort of the world changed, say 2005, 2006, 2007. By the time things started looking like they were going to happen, obviously the world sort of readjusted and changed, but that interest is starting to pick back up as the development world and as the real estate market start to pick back up and sales start to happen again. So, that will go, back on the forefront. But I think, for the last few years to start from scratch in some of those markets, again, for us, I want to make sure we pick something that makes sense. We pick a winner. We don't want to have a sort of a false start in a given market. I would rather wait and do it when it makes the most sense, and I think that's starting to get good again.
And what would you do in Russia? What kind of project?
It depends. I mean, the things that I've looked at thus far, I've looked at everything from resort to hotel. I was there last summer looking at a potential golf development because that's a big part of what we do also, high-end golf courses and championship type golf courses. A big part of what we do now is the hotel world, so building, managing, branding high-end hotel assets. So I think any of those things would be possibilities. Again, for us, one of the things that we have to do with the brand that my father's created over 30 years, it's a very ultra luxury brand. So could I have done projects in any of those markets? Yes. Would they have been the best in that market? I don't know. So for me, it's about making sure we get the best location, the best partner in that market. Are building the best hotel, the best structure, the best residential building, whatever it may be. So unfortunately, I see a lot of good deals that may make economic sense every week, but they're not really Trump deals. Meaning you wouldn't think of it as a Trump building, and so we have to be very careful how we play with that. Obviously, the name and the brand is a big part of the value of the company. The assets and the buildings are obviously very valuable, but for the next generation and for the future, preserving the brand that's been created and the value thereof is really perhaps one of the biggest annuities we could have. So we have to be very selective about what we choose to do.
And in that sense, you think that Georgia is a good place for such a brand?
I think so. I mean, what we're doing there is a very high-end building, small unit count. Obviously, it's a big feeder market to a lot of wealthy areas that are nearby. You know, we have another project going on in Istanbul and Turkey that, you know, all sort of feeder markets to there. And so when you see what's going on, you know, my father travels a lot as well. And when he goes there and it's like, wow, you know, is just very impressed with the things that are going on, you know, I think it makes sense. You know, so it's been looked upon very favorably in those markets. So I think so.
Okay, and as we understand, you are building also condo hotels, and there is no such thing in Eastern Europe at this moment. Well, at least it's not so much popular. Can you tell what is it, and why do you think
Sure.
it isn't popular in Eastern Europe?
Well, the condo hotel, we almost sort of invented it in the mid-90s. We did a redevelopment of One Central Park West, which is our Trump International Hotel and Tower overlooking the park. I'm sure a lot of your viewers or readers have stayed there because it's one of the best hotels in New York City. And when we were doing the redevelopment of that into a condominium building from a commercial building, changing the use, New York zoning required that you chop off the top 15 floors of the building or it had to remain commercial. Now, you didn't want to have an office building with residences above it. Didn't work as well given the layouts of the building. So we said, well, why don't we take the individual units, we'll make them like condominiums, we'll run it like a hotel, but you can buy one of the units. When you use it, you use it. When you don't use it, you own the cash flow associated with. It's like owning, for you if you're a buyer, it's like owning a one-unit hotel. Then, as it became, you know, sort of a good way to finance a hotel, it was very difficult to do the kind of build-outs and stuff like that, given sort of the longer-term payout of a hotel, conventional hotel model, that it became a good way to finance a hotel because you're selling it like a condominium, you're getting a lot of that generation today in terms of the payment, so you can build a building around it. But you then, you know, secure the long-term management contracts and these kind of things. The model worked very well for a long time in the US, but I think over time, too many other developers basically started getting the idea of, well, it doesn't really work as a hotel. We have an average site. It's not really a great location. It doesn't really work as a condominium. So let's do this, and we'll create this new model of hotel condo and try to do it everywhere. And so it sort of overpopulated you know, the market with that kind of product, and so it lost a lot of favor. You know, some places it's not as easy to do because of leasing or various zoning requirements, but you know, I think it's a model that's very viable in the right markets, in markets that make sense with the right product. When everyone tries to do it simply as a way to finance a project that wouldn't otherwise be financeable, it makes it sort of difficult and gives sort of the model, you know, a bad reputation. So it was good for a while when the world changed in 2006 and 2007, sort of, you know, no longer penciled economically because people are saying, well, I can't pay this much for real estate and only have this much on the cash flow model. So, you know, it's changed, but like everything else, it goes in cycles, right? So I'm sure that will come back again.
Will it come to Eastern Europe?
It may. You know, it depends on the markets. I'm sure people will do it there. I know people have presented us projects, you know, to look at that utilize that concept. But again, I think over the last few years, we opted to play it safe rather than take some of those chances, and I think we made the right decision with that.
Let's say your colleagues, children of rich people, used to criticize their parents a lot. Do you agree with them?
No, I think it's ridiculous. I think most of the... Listen, I think my sister was probably the one person in that interview that came off very well. I think a lot of the other kids in that interview, listen, I know them from growing up, but I think I'm very different than them. You know, they're upset at their parents because their parents gave them everything, and you know, then they want to criticize them. So it was actually very sad to see because there was no loyalty, there was no sense of family. I think we think very differently than that.
Wasn't it difficult to, let's say, grow in the shadow of your father, of this brand?
You know what, people ask me that a lot, and I think, you know, there's times where there's probably difficulty, but all in all, it could always be a lot worse. You know, like I said, I got to experience, you know, from a very young age with my grandfather in communist Czechoslovakia, how the other side lives, and you know what, you say, hey, it can certainly be a lot worse. And so I think perhaps one of the things that I have going for me genetically is that there's probably no lack of confidence in our gene pool. I think we're all pretty self-assured, and so I never really had an issue with growing up in his shadow. But you know, I also fully recognize that, you know, everything I know is because of him and because of what I've learned from him growing up. And you know, I didn't have the conventional childhood where I went and played football in the backyard with my father. I followed him on a job site. I went on a construction site. He was always there for us, but he's a business guy. So he was there for us on his terms. So we were always welcome to be there, but he was doing business. He was doing whatever it was that he was doing. He was building buildings. And so for me, instead of playing catch in the backyard, I experienced real estate and going around job sites from a very young age. So it was very good training, so to speak.
And you had never had another wishes?
It's not to say that I never had other wishes, but I think when you grow up doing something like that from such a young age, it's almost so natural that it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go work in the, it was like, well, I get to work on some of the coolest projects anywhere in the world. Why would I not want to do that? That said, I went to the Wharton School of Finance. After I graduated, I took a year off. I moved to Colorado. I worked in a bar for a year. I wanted to make sure, again, sort of going back to what I said earlier about, making sure to experience everything, never having any doubt about what else there could be. I think I've had a pretty good mix of, understanding that and realizing that I want to be where I'm at.
And what about university years? Girls' parties?
Listen, I would probably never, no one would ever say that I was an angel when I was younger, but I think everyone has to go through those kind of learning experiences. I think anyone who's never done anything or never messed up or never, been a little irresponsible probably isn't capable of functioning in the real world. So, like I said, I certainly was never an angel, but I did very well in university and I was able to have some fun at the same time.
But this experience, as we understand, included getting just $300 from your father per month.
Yes.
Was it enough?
No, it wasn't. But I think that's part of the lesson. I think so many of the kids perhaps in that video, they're 15 years old and they get a Ferrari. Well, you're 15, you're in college with a Ferrari. Well, what do you have to work for in life at this point? You've gotten everything that most people could ever aspire to. Well, yeah, maybe another one. But, for us, I think to say that we were not spoiled would be crazy. We were spoiled, but great educations, amazing vacations. We were incredibly, we traveled all over the world. We got to see things, we got to experience things that a lot of other people wouldn't do, but we were never spoiled just financially. We were never said, here's whatever you want, just leave us alone. They always kept us busy and focused. And I think, once you have that and you experience and you understand sort of the value of a dollar and what it takes to make it, it makes you hungry. It makes you want to work, as opposed to, sit back and just hope that things fall in your lap. So I think, while there were times that you see your friends doing the things that you'd love to be doing and you can't necessarily do them, you say, well, I'm going to work that much harder this summer so I can make a little bit more so that I can supplement, that lifestyle. And so, not always easy at times, but certainly an incredible lesson.
Your father have been starring in movies and TV shows. Don't you want to try?
Well, I've been on The Apprentice, which is his, the big TV show. I've been on that for about 6 or 7 seasons now, so we're doing that. But it's, I'm never going to quit my day job. I build buildings. I do that on the side. And when we're filming and when we're doing The Apprentice, I spend a couple hours doing that, and I just work later I work later that day doing the regular stuff. You can't, in a real business, when you do that and you're filming for a few months, you can't put everything else on hold while you're filming. You have to keep doing what you're doing. So I'm able to do both, but, the real estate and the business aspect of it never gets left behind. Okay,
are you interested in media business or just constructing?
Listen, it's fascinating to me in terms of how it functions, but, I'm sort of a believer in specialization. I think, you're a builder. It's perhaps more common in the U.S., in the emerging world, and a lot of the newer countries. Well, we own publishing, and we have media, and we do buildings. I for one, am more of a believer in specialization. I'm going to be much better as a real estate guy than if I'm a little bit real estate, a little bit media, a little bit TV, a little bit this. I think, to do well and to really thrive, for me at least, you have to kind of focus and pick a pony.
Okay, but you just described your father a little bit here, a little bit there, no?
No, that's not what I said. He's a real estate guy. He does everything that he does is basically there to build the brand, that he's been doing. So, again, for me, it's about specialization, and for him it is really too. I mean, he's able to do other things, but the core and the focus always goes back to the brand and to real estate.
Your father is keen on golf.
Yes.
Have you any hobbies?
I do. I play a little bit of golf, not as much. I'm more of a fisherman and an outdoorsman. I like to get into the wilderness, kind of do the opposite of what I get to experience during the week. I think that's, again, something I got a little bit from my grandfather. You know, dacha up in the mountains in Czech, and I used to love being there and being in the woods. So, you know, I do like golf. I play pretty well, but, you know, for the most part, I rather be in the woods fishing or perhaps hunting and these sort of things. So, little bit more outdoorsy.
So,
Okay.
okay, thank you very
That's
much.
it. Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.